My friend Donna Lyon, welcome to Roll with the Punches.
Thank you.
You're the boss of the hour, so you have full authority to shut me up and take the reins anytime.
Oh, it feels like I'm getting the upper hand with boxing, which is you're giving that to me. You're giving me this fight.
You get to control the ring. You get
Yeah.
the center ring, and I've got to be on the back foot for these few rounds.
Which is really helpful because often I'm the one on the back foot. So yeah, it's good. It's good to have that permission. Thank you.
Excellent. How are you doing? How are you doing with this lockdown we're in?
Just, crazy, irritable, angry, need to punch something. But training for a marathon instead, just to kind of focus the energy.
Yeah, I tell you what, me too, in terms of I've stayed very busy and made quite good of the situation as best I can, but I can't wait to, hit the bag. I can't wait to get out and get boxing. I've been physical, I've been training, I've been moving, but nothing is quite the same.
Nothing's the same as being able to really channel that energy into a bag and, sparring. And I really, really miss that.
Yeah. I had just had a conversation with someone this morning. We were training, and then she mentioned that she's in New Zealand and they're also locked down. She said, I haven't done anything. And we were talking about running, and she said, I can't, people always say that running clears their head. She goes, it doesn't make me escape. She likes to do weight training and things where she gets to focus on technique and that. She goes, with running, it's like it's all my thoughts. She goes, it's just me and my thoughts, and doesn't get. Then I think boxing's quite the opposite. It's you there's no room for your own thoughts when you're boxing.
Yeah, there's not. And that's what I like about it. Like, boxing is a bit of a meditation for me. And I think running is too, because I think that, the thoughts still pass.
Yeah.
And so you're noticing and then you're forgetting, and you're noticing and forgetting. And so it is a kind of mindfulness. And it's the only kind of practices that I think that I can do, in terms of from traditional mindfulness, or like I can't do yoga, or I can't do those things that get me in my body unless it's very physical and kind of aggressive.
Yes. I'm with
There was a look on my face.
Yeah.
Anyone listening on a podcast, there was a look.
I'm with you, sister. I am with you. All right. So we were introduced recently, very, very recently, from Lee Renfrey. Shout out to Lee. Thank you. She said, I've had an inquiry at the gym, and I think you and this chick need to meet because I think you guys are going to get along like a house on fire. And I was like, all right then. Shout it out, and my word, we caught up for a coffee, and I was like, well, she's awesome. And what was funny is you were looking for someone to help out with an upcoming workshop, and at the time of agreeing to meet you, I was literally said to myself, I got no time to include anything. Like, I've got no time for that. But something made me want to meet you, and far out, by the time I left that coffee, I was like, I don't care what's on my schedule. I'm finding a way to be involved in what Donna is doing.
Well, thank you. That's awesome.
So tell us about Donna Lyon and what Donna Lyon is brewing up.
Gosh, well, I wrote a little introduction because I thought you were going to start with the kind of, so tell us who you are. So I'm going to start with that because that's kind of like I've written it and, I have to stick to the script. So I'm Donna Lyon, and I'm an academic, and I'm actually 6 days away from being awarded my PhD. So the next time you speak to me, I'm going to be Dr. Donna Lyon.
Wow. Massive, massive, massive congratulations. I'm hearing a lot about how freaking hard.
Thank you. So that's absolutely huge.
We just froze.
So we just broke up. Yeah, we froze. Yeah. It is hard, and it's hard for anybody, and it was also really hard for me because I had to battle myself and the negative belief systems that I was operating, under and within. And so it feels like a massive achievement. I'm really, really proud that, I did it. And I didn't think I could do it the whole time. I didn't think I could do it, and I did it. So, I think I'm just saying it kind of,
What was your research on? What was your area of research?
Well, this is very separate to kind of what we're talking about today, but it's also actually quite connected. So I did a very large digital archive project. So basically I work at the University of Melbourne at the Film and Television Department. And I was overseeing all the films, and there was no way to play them because they were all on like analog media or 16mm film. And so what I did was I basically led a digitisation, preservation and access project so that all the student films in the collection, and they dated back to 1966, were made accessible, and they now are in a digital archive platform. And so student, staff, researchers, public can engage with the films in really new and exciting ways. And how it's connected to kind of what we're talking about today is that I guess as I was doing the project, in a sense, what I did was I produced a digital archive because I'm also a producer. I started to notice that the memories that were inside me, like my hidden archive of self, were starting to kind of take light and form. And so what I did alongside the project is that I actually started to write about my trauma for the first time. And I started to kind of come out as a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. And so it was a fascinating project because, you know, I was kind of bringing these films to light, to memory, to new audiences, to a recontextualization. And that's kind of the process that I was going on as well as a survivor. I'm also a boxer, and
you are.
I am, and and a survivor of extreme childhood sexual abuse, and that has caused dissociation and a really fragmented identity and a fragmented sense of self, or selves, as I kind of refer to myself as kind of being multiple in a sense, and. Yeah, and I think kind of just coming back to the digital archive project for a minute was that what I did was I started to think about the films that I made when I was about 18. And I got out my old VHS tapes that I'd carried around from, you know, house to house, and I watched them. And I was like, oh my God, I was making stuff basically about my trauma at that age. Wow. And I didn't know. Wow. I had no idea, right? Like I didn't remember I'd been abused till I was about 26. And even then it was all, you know, very amnesic and really repressed and very hidden. And so it was all this stuff that I was kind of dealing with in therapy. I'm like, oh my God, so did I kind of know? What did I know about myself that I didn't know, that I was kind of unconsciously trying to create or access or tell? And so I think, and so I wondered, I guess, how other people also, you know, were they also making films like that as students? And there's lots of reasons that people make films, and, you know, and that's certainly only one aspect of it. But it was certainly something that really inspired me to keep with the project. And I think has, and it's kind of been this living archive. It is a living archive. And I guess I see myself in a sense as this living archive, this person that has this stored trauma, these stored memories. And that as I continue to recover and go through these processes of like writing and creating and making, that I'm kind of recreating a narrative, a lost narrative, and creating new narratives as well.
Wow. So the majority of this archiving kind of that emerged from you, how long ago was the beginning of that?
6 years.
Wow.
It was a 6-year project, and it was really huge. And I was doing lots of other things while I was working full time. I was also produced a feature film. And then at the same time, I just got into boxing. Yeah. And then, you know, I started a boxing and writing workshop for other survivors. So, you know, all parts of me, and that's what I mean about this idea of like fragmentation, is like there's kind of like this... just lots of parts of me, I guess. And I think the other thing as well about the PhD and the archive is that I think as a survivor, I was so disconnected from my sense of self and my body. And so as I wrote the PhD and reflected on the process of producing the project, the process of doing, because reflecting in the moment was really, really hard for me. Like it was really hard to sit with self. And so even though I think inherently in the arts, one is reflective, because it's part of one's practice to be reflective, I didn't know really how to do it. Like I couldn't sit with self. So I could do the project really, really easy. I could produce that project, no problem. But then the writing was really difficult because that was the process of kind of really starting to kind of unpack, construct my thoughts. And that was the really hard stuff. And plus I also had, a voice kind of saying, you're worthless, you're a piece of shit, you can't do this. So, battling all these kind of things. But what I realized as I was writing is that actually through the process of being involved in the arts, really as a child from the age of about 7, my mother got me into drama, that like I was starting to construct a sense of self through making and creating. And that's what I've done kind of through my life, and that's what I've done through the PhD project. And I think that construction of my identity has made me, sometimes it's made me feel sad that I've had to construct my identity, but also sometimes I feel really blessed because I'm like, well, that's cool. Like, that's exciting and innovative and imaginative.
Yeah.
That I've had the privilege of being able to construct my own sense of self.
I'm fascinated by all of that, and as you're saying it, I'm kind of dipping in and out of thinking of my situation and my story and my journey and the parallels in terms of the boxing especially. Do you feel like the boxing itself, that physical, was a really key element?
Huge. I came to boxing because I was angry, and I think there was so let me rewind a step. 26, I remembered my abuse. And then I'm like, right, I'm going to, like, that's it. I've been abused. Oh, my gosh. Can't believe I didn't know.
What triggered that memory? What brought that?
A woman at a party who had a fascinating life story. She'd written 3 books. And, I was with my partner at the time, and we were like, well, what's your life story? It sounds fascinating. You've written 3 books. And she spoke and told her story of abuse. And something she said just triggered me, and I didn't even know what that meant, triggered. And so I just said, I've got to go to the bathroom. And then I just felt like the room spinning. And then I said to my partner, I said, I need to go home. And in the car, I just cried, like these tears, these guttural tears that I was like, where is this coming from? Like, I'm like, it's like this emotion, like it had no end. And I was just like, something's happened to me, like something really, really bad's happened to me, and I don't know what it is though. And then when I woke up the next morning, I was like, I've been sexually abused. And I was like, okay. And then, with the day or whatever, I was like, okay, yeah, right, that's okay, this has happened. I'm going to fix it. Right, I'll get the books, and I'll, go and see the people, and I'll, just kind of get healed or whatever it is. And the more that I kind of did that, the worse it got and the harder it got. And so then, and it felt like it was futile, and it was hard, and it was all that. And so it was like I had this kind of desire to heal and get better, but actually that the trauma was so deeply stored in my body and was, it was probably quite dangerous in a sense I had to access it very gently, and that wasn't necessarily part of my personality. And so I'd already drank as a coping mechanism. And so in a sense, my alcoholism got worse. And then at the age of 31, I got sober. I'm nearly 10 years in sobriety. And so So it took about 5 years of kind of recovery. And then I was like, okay, now, and I was very tired during that time. I was doing a lot of recovery, a lot of, 12-step stuff. And it was fantastic, and rebuilding my life and my career. And then I was like, okay, now I'm starting to feel angry. Like I feel like I want to box, I want to channel this. And that's how I landed into boxing. And within a few months I was fighting.
I just love that. I just love that. I've had goosebumps so many times throughout that story. I've been reading your book every single night. It's amazing. We'll talk about that soon. But what captured me straight away was, I remember when we sat down for coffee and I told you about my relationship with boxing, and you were fascinated, and we talked about the parallels. But when I read through your experience and your interpretation of what boxing did for you and the metaphor of it, to me, I was like, wow, it's almost kind of polar opposite.
It really is. And you did a podcast a couple of days ago with Jenny Valentish, I think it is.
Yep.
And I remember you saying like that you had this, like, even though you grappled with your low, self-belief and all of that, which is, very similar to how I felt, but there was also this part of you that also felt like you could win.
Yes.
Or you were going to win, whether or not you knew it at the time, right? Whereas for me, the more that I started to do it, like, that was the hardest bit. It was like, it's like it reaffirmed this powerlessness. And it was like I was enacting this trauma where it's like I deserve to be beaten, I deserve to be hit. And to fight back, it was the hardest thing. Even though that's the whole point of boxing, right? So it's not a good move when you're in a ring going, I'm freezing, and then someone just punches in your face and they're like, why aren't you punching back? I don't know. I don't think I'm here, and so of course I did punch back, because obviously, but I never won. And I won one fight right at the end, which is a kind of, I guess I've got to go like, I did win one. But I think the more I took it into that competitive space, the worse it got for me in terms of, I think what I was doing with boxing is that I was trying to move past the freeze response, which is great. And it was so important, but it was the training aspect that was very empowering for me.
Yes.
The fighting part, as in a competitive space, was the disempowering part. Because that, like, I remember in one fight, it was second round. I mean, and this girl was like kind of one of those brawlers, like kind of comes out and messy fighter, and I'm kind of like, I'm technique. But probably in amateur fights, it's better to be a brawler. The aggressive one wins.
Yeah.
But it just wasn't kind of characteristic of me. And I remember then being on the bench or bars or whatever you call it, and and this voice inside me says, I can't beat them. And I'm like, oh my God, like that's like a child part. Like, and I'm like, that's not appropriate for you to be here right now. But just like, that's the psyche. Like that was what was going on in my head. It was like this person was so aggressive, and it's like this little part in me who's trying to like, I can beat them. And it's like, they can't. Of course they couldn't. They're a child. But it was, so in a sense, it was like a kind of a trauma reenactment that I think I was going through, that I don't regret. It's just that it was a very different experience, I think, to perhaps maybe the physicality and that you might have felt in the ring.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's that, and what I know that brought up a lot of my, I guess, bringing yourself closer to the physical body and stepping into your body and emotions. You start, when you move in a powerful manner and you start to control your movements and apply force and hit a target and control your own body, it shifted emotions. I was so out of touch with emotions. I was having a lot of thinking and so curious about my human behavior inside that area, but equally I'd go for walks and out of nowhere, in a blink of an eye, start crying hysterically, walking down fucking Chapel Street. How embarrassing, like I'm walking along, next minute I'm howling, and I'm like, if someone come up to me right now and said, hey, what's wrong? What can I do to take it away? I'd be like, I don't know what I'm crying about. So I was so confused that I couldn't even label emotions. All I knew is body's tired. It's trying to push down feelings. I don't want to process the feelings. I don't want to know the feelings. Feelings have always been dangerous, so let's not feel them. So let's just cry and be confused and tired and collapse in bed.
Absolutely. And I think that makes sense, because for survivors to feel is scary, because you're having to feel the pain and the hurt and the grief and all the other things that a child can't even necessarily articulate. Yeah. And so, of course, to feel is scary. And I know for me, like in my journey of kind of recovery, that, accessing feelings has been the hardest thing, because even like, and that's why it took me so long from like 26 to, really 35 when I started to probably heal in a more targeted way, was that I felt like if I feel I'm going to die, that's what it felt like in my nervous system, like I'm going to die.
Yes.
And so that's why it had to be super gentle, super slow.
Yeah. When you were pre-26, what was your, I guess, outside view of your life and where you're at and you as a person?
Just didn't have a very deep or clear or articulate idea. I didn't have language for how I felt. I think most people would have probably thought, oh, she's got her life together, or she's, I was pretty strong, pretty confident, because, again, like I'd been in drama since I was like 7 years old. So,
Stepping into characters, easy.
Yeah, exactly. Like I was confident, like that actually is me. And so, but I didn't perhaps go deep with people. I felt better when I was busy. I drank and I, did all the things that you kind of do in your 20s. I found it very difficult to get closer to people. I shut down. I sabotaged all of those things, but I guess I could kind of pin it on my 20s. I thought I was going to be great. I had lived a very imaginative life in my head.
Yeah.
So, like I kind of, and it was like I had ideas like if I'm not running a studio or something at the, age of 28, like I'm a loser. It's like rather than thinking like actually that kind of happens when you're 50 or 60, like for most people.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a few exceptions, but yeah, it's just I had a lot of delusion and a lot of dissociation, a lot of denial, but I wouldn't have known that.
Yes. Yeah. It was like ignorance is bliss, huh? Like totally. I remember you take the lid off it and you peer in and you're like, oh, look at the mess in there.
Yes,
and then so you go to put the lid on and it's like, there's no putting the lid back on.
No.
It's a bottle of champagne. The lid doesn't go back on this.
Yeah. And waking up is scary because you're like, how did I kind of like, did other people know? Or, and yeah.
Yes. Wow. Talk about the program you've put together.
Yeah. So, I went through that process of kind of 18 months into amateur fighting, or about 12, 18 months. And then at the end, I was like, look, I'm in this competitive space. I'm not winning. I don't even want to be a bloody champion boxer. Like, but what am I doing? I keep getting smacked in the face, basically, punched in the head. I need to probably really rethink my strategy here. Is fighting the way to go? And I was like, well, actually, I love boxing. And so I knew that I wanted to work with survivors. I wanted to work with other women like me. And I think because I have a creative arts background that I was really interested in this idea of, well, what would it mean if I got my level 1 boxing coach certificate? But I thought, well, it's not like I'm a good boxer. I've lost all these fights. So it's not like I can be training these people in this kind of way, like, hey, follow me. But what I thought was, well, why don't I do something that's a bit creative and a bit different? So I thought, well, I'll pair writing with boxing. And so basically I created a project called Left, Right, Hook, and the right is in writing.
Yeah.
And
brilliant.
It brings together women survivors of childhood sexual abuse. And we spend the first hour where we write to a prompt, we share the writing, and then we kind of let it go. And then I just teach them boxing. You don't have to be a great writer. You certainly don't have to be a great boxer, but it's just about coming back into your body. And it's also about starting to kind of, I think, really locate some of that anger that's often very, very repressed for survivors, and basically just let rip.
I love it. I love it. Did you want to read any of your book?
Did you have anything that you wanted me to read? I did pick something just in case.
Great. I'd like your writing, by the way, is from. So I started reading this book last week or whenever it was when you dropped one off to me, and I messaged you the next day, and I was like, "That is extremely powerful as a fellow survivor reading the most raw snapshots, you know, a page of someone's thoughts written to a prompt. And I've got goosebumps right now because I said to you, I just felt like I was in the workshop with them, and it's, you know, it's just opening up all these different versions of stories and feelings and experiences that are the same but different.
Yeah.
And it's just, yeah, it's amazing. But yeah, get your read on.
All right. Well, I chose the prompt being present because I thought that kind of fitted with the boxing theme.
Perfect.
Okay. Being present used to be an impossible task, led me to alcoholism, led me to panic attacks, led me to shaking, regression, led me to dissociation. Being present is unpleasant, nighttime terrors. Sometimes it's fun, sensual, then I switch. Being present is momentary. Being present is confusing, set me off, send me sideways. Being present is not knowing. I am present, presenting. It is presenting a self who needs to operate in a moment. It is being able to perform with ease. It's not watching myself at a distance, slightly to the left, seeing hands on paper. Objectively seeing body as object. Pen in hand, that is not present. It is presenting me to myself. It is my form of present. It is self-conscious. Being present leads to body memories, bad dreams. I avoid it when I can. Being present is listening to the icky, irky, yucky crawling over my skin. It is feeling electric current, snapshots of synapses, fizzing, momentary bouts of pain before a blanket of present denial goes up, covers the day. Being present is new age hype, designed for the wealthy. It is a reality of fear, horror, pain, depression, guilt, and shame for the survivor. Being present is feeling. It sends me blank. What I really want to say is what I really want to say is what I really want to say is. And I end with that. What I really want to say is because that's something that in the writing workshop, if the writer gets stuck, that they have to write that continually, because what that does is it kind of tends to then break the kind of pattern, and but then the timer went off.
That is, like, your writing is so captivating, and I love that piece that you just read. I don't think I've gotten to that one in the book yet.
I think that's round 2.
Oh, I probably have then.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, there's a lot in there. So with the workshop, what I did is I ran it in a really grassroots way. You know, I ran it at my local boxing gym for a couple of times just to test the idea with a group of women. And, you know, it was very powerful and very, profound. And then because I'm an academic, I thought, well, and there was an opportunity to apply for a creativity and wellbeing research grant. And so I worked with psychologists and a wellbeing expert and a documentary filmmaker. And we got a group of women and we said, basically, we're going to run the workshop. We're going to film it. We're going to test how you go in terms of the process, like, and will you get better or what will happen? And we're going to make a book together and we're going to make a documentary. And I got this incredibly brave group, small group of women, there was about 8 of us. And this was last year in 2020, and 2 weeks into the project, COVID hit. And we'd done 2 weeks in a gym, and then we pivoted online because I was like, I don't know how long this thing's going to be here for. And we did research on the project for 8 weeks, and the results showed that there was a reduction in PTSD and reduction in depression and stress, and an increase in like kind of well-being and agency. And then, so that was in the 8 weeks, which is awesome. But because we had created such an intimate environment online, and COVID was like sticking around, we were like, well, why don't we just continue the project till the end of the year? And so we did it in 3 rounds, and that's why we produced a book together, which has just been released, which is all curated writings from the 3 rounds of the workshop, and all the survivors chose their own writings that they wanted to put in the book. You know, everyone kind of contributed. It was really a participatory project. You know, I edited the book, but it's written by everyone, and we're also in the process of making a documentary, which is hard and random, and who knows what it's going to be like, because it's really hard being on camera for everyone, not just for me, you know.
especially in the context of what you're producing, I'm sure.
Oh, totally. It's just like, yeah, it's.
But if there's one thing I've learned from this podcast is, and I'm sure they feel it and you feel it already, and I'm sure at the end of this, when there's a documentary produced, that it's just leaps and bounds into healing when you open up and speak to the world. And
I think so.
I can only imagine that, when they get to watch the final product, what that's going to look like. And I'm sure it's going to be a wave of turmoil throughout the process, ups and downs and vulnerability hangovers. Don't we know about those?
Totally. Shame hangovers and yeah, absolutely. And I think, but I come back to that, like the more I talk about my experiences, and I'm not talking the details, but just the kind of lay claim to this is who I am and this is the feelings and the effects of that, the better I've got. And also too that I think being, having been I am a filmmaker, and so I think I understand that like a piece of work is bigger than oneself. So even though like, yes, there's of course going to be a lot of shame and feelings and insecurities around the film, like ultimately when I watch something, I'm not going, oh God, like that person who's sharing their life story, like, ugh, unless it's Married at First Sight or something like that, maybe it's a different kind of reaction. But, a documentary with authenticity and, people sharing their kind of truths, I love them.
Yes.
And so I'm kind of just remembering like, this is not about me, and it's not even really about the women. It's what we represent.
That paragraph that you just read is like literally hanging in my mind right now, and
Which
it's
one?
hanging in the presence, being present, because I just, as you were saying it, and then you touched on it in the writing, but as you were saying it, I was like, again, it's like the conversations I keep having on privilege and the homeless. The same theory applies here, because I'm like, look out.
Oh, that's my doorbell. Hang on. Sorry. Typical. Yeah.
Just wait till the dog answers the door.
No, hang on a second. Hopefully my partner will get hurt.
Hopefully it's some
online. It's probably her birthday present. Let's hope. Sorry. It's okay.
Is it her birthday? Happy birthday.
Okay. Sorry.
That's all right.
It's a long cut. That's good though.
Time to regroup.
Yeah.
Time to regroup.
Might just give it a minute until she comes back in and
everyone calms down.
That's it. No, she's coming back in. You're talking about? Yeah. All right. Okay. We can start. Sorry.
Yeah. So that idea around, it's the same theory around this whole being present, and like you said, everyone's be present meditation, and we say it with no context of what someone else has been through, and to like, even as you were saying that, I was thinking, God, am I even aware of that? Being present upon people, and what that might even, where that might take them.
And that some people almost, it's not respecting the different states of trauma and seeing that being present is important, but it's not the be all and end all. And I think that there's a kind of Eastern philosophy that we try and adopt here that's perhaps not even really integrated into the Western life that we lead. And then, combine that with somebody who's, literally been traumatized to be in body. It's a really uncomfortable process. And then to be kind of judged potentially for not being able to be present is deeply problematic. And so I think I'm not against mindfulness and I'm not against meditation, but I know for me, often those processes actually can be counter to my healing. And so whilst I want to get to a point where I can do those things, because it's obvious that they're very good for you, I have to be really, really gentle, and I'm better to just do what I can or choose to heal in the way that I need to heal. And if that's through punching a bag, then that's through punching a bag. if that's through running, then that's through running.
Yeah.
And maybe one day it might be through sitting down and, noticing my body. But right now, that's not right. That's not good for me.
I'm just thinking of years and years ago, and I've done meditation retreats since, but I'd signed up for a beginner's meditation over in the western suburbs, and the first one, and everyone knows I put everything on social media. There's nothing I do that the whole world doesn't bloody know about. So I remember going to this. I was going to this 6-week Buddhist meditation course, and we would sit and talk about stuff, and then we would go and sit in the circle and do the meditation. And this is what would happen with me with meditation: is I would sit, and then I would get like immediately like head fall forward, extremely tired, like I was. And then when I would resist the urge to fall asleep, I'd start to get like I can't sit still, like this tension in all my muscles and my body, and I would fidget, and then I would get angry, and then I'd be like splitting my eyes open, looking at everyone else just chilling there, and I would get really angry. And when we talked about our experience in the circle, and they said, and this was before I had, I don't even know how far in my journey or if at all I was with this, but I remember them saying, "Oh, your mind doesn't want you to go somewhere," or there was just something, and it unsettled me. Something come up for me, and I remember driving home. My friend was driving, so I was sitting. I was gonna put something on Facebook, and then I just closed it. I went, I'm not ready to talk about that. And it was like nothing even happened, but something happened. And it's when I realized that going within and letting go and not controlling and not doing and not thinking, not controlling thoughts was a really scary thing for me at that time. And
Yeah, and therefore it's really important to go slowly and also to maybe go in through other ways. You don't have to go that way. That might work for someone else.
Yeah.
But you might be able to notice your thoughts and feelings and behaviors through other means. And they're just as valid and just as good for you. Yeah. Whereas I think, I just think that I probably judged that process for me in ways that I think were quite damaging, rather than just accepting that maybe, okay, well, that's cool. That's not for me. So wonder what is.
For you, being the facilitator of the workshop, but obviously also being a participant within the workshop, what was that experience like, and what came out of it that was, did you have an expectation, and did you meet any expectations, or was it completely a left field kind of experience?
Yeah, it was probably a left field experience, and I knew that I'd created a really solid framework, and I had a kind of rigor around that. So I think, I think it was hard being a facilitator, but not. I think that was very important that I was a survivor, and I tried to create a non-hierarchical structure of the group. So I didn't really feel comfortable being seen as the kind of, the one that was, I don't know, like the power thing, the boss. Yeah. At the same time, it was also important that I was able to hold the space. I think I felt it allowed me to have empathy for others and myself in a way that perhaps I couldn't access through other means. It was often like I'd come to the group and, just try and be as honest as I could. And then it was like, oh, right, now I'm starting to feel emotion. Like, oh, that's like kind of here, obviously, like all the time. But like, I don't know that that's there most of the time. And it's only like when I'm with people that I guess that I can, I don't know, be safe with or something.
Yeah. Did you find that when you have a little rummage around like that, have a little rummage around in the healing, did you find that there was a kind of an after effect? Like, I know that when I first started therapy, I would go in, have a conversation with my analytical mind, sit down, blah, 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 yep, whatever, see ya. And then I'd see this pattern that a few days later, there was just this kind of emotional turmoil. There was these ups and downs and ebbs and flows in my emotions that were kind of out of control. So I had to anticipate that. And as time went by, the period between the conversation and the effect of it would get nearer. but I developed this mechanism where it was don't feel or process until we're out of the zone. So it was like days at first.
Oh, days. And it still is for me.
Yeah, wow.
It still is days, sometimes weeks.
Yeah.
I have a very, very delayed emotional processing, and often I'm not even processing because I feel like I keep myself really busy. I'm on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And so it's something I'm really just, well, I don't know if I'm working on it. Like, you know, I'm doing the work, you know,
Yeah.
I go to therapy, I do this, you know, like, and eventually it will kind of, you know, become something that's got a bit of a rhythm to it, or I'm able to address it. But yeah, I just find it really difficult to process things.
Yeah. I guess when I learned about that, and it's good once you learn about it and you're like, oh, well, it exists, and now I know how to work around it. But when I started first learning that, I was like, isn't it funny how as a human entity we develop a coping mechanism to keep us safe, but that mechanism actually doesn't, because we can't make the right judgments in situations because we're on this automatic pilot, right? And that automatic pilot for me was very, I have no emotion. My emotions don't matter, so I'll tuck them away. I'll accommodate you. I'll say yes to everything. So then you put yourself in situations that really you don't want to be in, and which is essentially is unsafe.
Yeah, I hear you.
So our bloody brains do this thing, go on this autopilot to keep us safe, and it does the opposite.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it's just a really hard thing, and it's a process of repeated trial and error, and a process of kind of forgiving self, and a process for me of like also trying to, as much as possible, name the feelings or the state that I'm in. So like with left, right, hook, I noticed that in the first few workshops I was coming, like I'd pick a fight with my partner in the morning, or I'd be like super anxious or super stressed, you know, and then and it was, you know, because the workshop was coming up. And then I got to the workshop and then I started to talk about it. Oh, I've just noticed that this is happening for me. And once I named it, then it sort of went away the next few weeks. Like I wasn't really experiencing that. You know, there were other times in the workshop where I was like, I feel like the group thought I was really stupid or hated me, or, you know, that they're judging me. And I'd name it. I'd just say, this is how I feel. And I know it's not true, and I know it's transference. But I'm telling you kind of like, just this is it. And then again, that would pass. And so where possible, I try and name that stuff, but also acknowledge too that sometimes that connection is often quite lost.
Yeah. And it can be a really confusing space, you know, that space where you're in the middle of taking ownership of some things and being aware of them, but still when moving through it the right way. Do you know what I mean? Like,
well, it's about not making it other people's stuff. And I think that's something in left, right, hook that, you know, I talk about in the framework. It's like, I'm allowed to have these feelings, but I'm not expecting you to hold them for me.
Yeah.
Like I'm just going to name them, you know, so I am me, you know, you are you, you know, we are we. And that's really important, that when our boundaries have been stripped away, that, you know, we try and practice that. And so I'm not trying to shove it onto the group. I'm just saying, this is kind of where I'm at. I don't need you to respond. I don't even need you to tell me that you love me and that I'm doing a great job. I don't need that. I just need to tell you that this is how I'm feeling. Yeah. And that was like one of the things in the group, is that, you know, we tried to just not say, oh, that was an amazing piece of writing, or, you know, not even really comment about what people wrote or anything. It was just like, let people have their own experience.
That's so amazing. Talk to me about your experience with boundaries as a survivor.
What boundaries? Could you explain what that is? No, I
don't know.
Yeah,
mate.
Exactly. That's why you asked me the question.
Ask someone else.
Yeah. Let me see. Boundaries was something that I had none of, and did not have boundaries all of my life until probably like 35, years of age, I started to think about boundaries. And I think, really through a process of recovery, through a process of sponsoring people, through a process of having my boundaries constantly taken advantage of, or putting myself, into codependent situations or people pleasing and all of those kind of things. I learnt, and reflecting on my past in terms of the many times and situations that I got myself into situations with partners, people, because I had no boundaries, learning to accept that, kind of grieve for it, mainly just accept it, and just kind of like, wow, that's sad. Just sad. And so I think I've got better boundaries now, but it's still very hard for me. And I'm a work in progress. I just try, I've noticed some little shifts and changes, like maybe, don't reach out to that person when you want to. Like, hold that. Like, oh, you've got a really interesting thought or idea. Just hold it. Like, see where that goes. Like, in a day, like, you don't have to get yourself into the next project or the next thing or the next whatever. Like, or like jump into bed really quickly with that person. Not literally, but like in a way. And just let that sit. Like, if you're meant to work together, or if you're meant to have a relationship, or if that's meant to fly, it will fly. Just trust that. Just slow down. And I have started to do that so that's progress.
That is massive progress. Oh, it's so interesting to listen to. I feel like I'm just here winding it up into a little therapy session for me.
No, not at all.
A little show and tell.
Yeah, look, it's a bit of kind of compassion around like the fact that like I've just done so many things without having boundaries, and that I just think is a direct result of being violated as a child.
Yeah, one of the things that unsettled me fairly recently after some conversations on this podcast, and obviously speaking of my experience, and I think it might have been after a conversation with Dr. Bill Saunders, I remember coming across the statistics around, and I went and researched them because there's something come up around the female adults that were childhood sexual abuse survivors, and the statistics around ones who were as adults who were sexually abused. And that unsettled me, and I kind of went, hang on, what are we doing? And it got me into looking around the behaviors and the understandings and the way that we're functioning, and what aren't we equipped with that is allowing us to be put into these situations that on a logical, analytical level, I'm very smart. I know my wares. We know how to, I can interact with people. I'm very articulate. I can have communication between people. But then on this other level, there's people who have been stripped of a certain function where they're not seeing danger cues, or they're not understanding where a line has actually been crossed, then they're put in a dangerous situation. And that frightened me.
It is frightening. And I think that's because we don't talk about it, and we don't admit it, and we're silenced, and we're silenced as children. And it's often very later in our adult lives that many women will start to, for the first time, say, I'm a sexual abuse survivor. And if they I wonder if they had have been able to talk about it, name it, and talk about the effects of that and what can happen, that maybe some of those things that re-traumatization can stop. And that's where we can circumvent it. But I think yes, I did, because I think I was repeating patterns of my trauma. I felt like I should be abused. I felt like I was a piece of shit and that my body was nothing. I deserved to be punched. I deserved to be beaten. I deserved to be raped. All of those things. Of course I didn't. Of course I don't. I know that they're really sick, unhealthy beliefs. Of course I do.
Yeah.
But that's a really deeply ingrained part of me that was abused as a child, who was threatened, don't talk about this. If you talk about this, you'll die. If you talk about this, you'll go to jail. You'll go insane, etc. And so I never had language, but now I do. And that's why I feel like I'm using my voice to talk about it, because, it's 1 in 3 women who have been sexually abused. And, they're all presenting with all sorts of effects. I'm depressed, I'm overweight, I'm anxious. Where's that coming from? I'm not, and again, I'm mindful that I'm sounding like I'm making every kind of mental health issue is related to that, and perhaps it is, and perhaps it's not. And I'm not as black and white as that, but it's something that I am really passionate about, because absolutely, I spent a lot of time re-traumatizing myself, and I think that's because I didn't have the language. No one talked about it, and once I started talking about it, that's when those patterns of behaviour stopped.
Yes.
Yeah, sure. I still, can struggle with boundaries, but it's softer stuff. It's like saying yes to something that I don't want to do. It's not getting myself into a damaging relationship, or it's not getting myself into, one night stands that make me feel cheap or whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
Or drinking, alcohol because I can't stop. All of those things.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I had this conversation again this morning. I was talking about sugar. I had a great episode on sugar recently, sugar in our biology, and one thing that I guess I kind of knew but had never voiced or never maybe isolated this piece of the puzzle, but a lot of my abuse because I was very, very young when it started, and it was lollies were a form of bribery and reward for enduring. So there was that situation where go through something shit, here's some sugar, here's a lolly. And when my mum used to put me to bed, I was a shithead to get to bed. So I was like, she would have to bribe me. She was like, if you go to bed, I grew up in a shop. We lived in a shop. So she's like, I'll bring you a surprise. And she'd come in with a handful of lollies. So recently, and it rang true because I was thinking of a time when I had therapy in the CBD, and I hate driving in the CBD anyway. So I was already like, I hate going to the CBD. Plus, I was starting with a new therapist. This was years ago. And what got me surprised was I was not eating sugar at the time. I was going through a not eating sugar stage. I was doing great. And on the way where I was not feeling anxious or stressed, I was feeling on normal, on the level, and went straight into a 7-Eleven and bought a bunch of bloody Reese's peanut butter cups and sugar. And I did that every time I went to that therapy session. I was like, the body's going, under the radar, we're anxious, we're going to do something we don't like, we better get some of that sugar that comes with the thing that we don't like.
It's just so amazing how the brain works, and that unconscious kind of repetition or association and linking.
It's just opened my mind up so much to, there's biology of putting food in our mouth, and then the neurochemistry that's released, but then there's also the stories and the history and everything that's been formed and the conditioning underneath that as well, the emotional stuff. It's bloody fascinating. What was in the course, either for yourself or for someone else or for you to witness, was there any really hard or unsettling? Was there an experience that was hard to hear, hard to admit, hard to go through?
In the program of Left Right Hook?
Yeah.
Not really. Like, I mean, I think the whole thing was it
hasn't come through yet.
Yeah, it hasn't come through. Give me another year.
I'll ask you next week.
Yeah, just give me a year to process that one. Look, I think that just turning up and saying to a group of women, I am a survivor of, incest and extreme childhood sexual abuse, is a trigger and is unsettling. Yeah. So it's just the process. But I really welcome that. And I think that for me, there's nothing too much for people to share. There's no censorship. I just want them to lay it all out. I don't care how triggering and disgusting and horrible it is. I think it's great because, it's the first time often that people have been able to say this stuff. And I think it's really important that people have a safe space where they can air it. So I guess I welcome that, but there wasn't anything like, other than the emotional complexities of a project like this, I don't think that there was anything that threw me. I mean, probably, the things that throw me are like, people want to do this, or, I need to be accountable, and like, oh, people are listening to me. You know, there's those surprises of like, oh, I've got to. People do want to catch up. People do want to be friends. Like, oh, why? Why would you want to be friends with me? You know, like those are the kind of unsettling moments of like developing relationship with others that I find challenging because, you know, obviously relationships were tarnished. And so I learned through that process.
One of the things that was really inspiring, God, I've just sat here and got goosebumps over goosebumps over goosebumps. My body's going to be tired from getting goosebumps from this conversation. One of the things I love is that you are a representation of you. Such, you know, I mean, you've come in, you've produced this documentary, you've hosted this program, you've got, you know, therapists and psychologists, everybody involved in it. You've got this book together. It's incredible. You've facilitated all of this, and it's quite authoritative. But then I read it, and I love that you strip that away to just being a participant. You're this human being that's in the middle of your healing and bringing others along, bringing us all along. And I love that. And I think that out of everything, that's one of the most powerful components, because as a reader and anyone else that might be holding their story inside themselves and have never spoken it, to open this book that you've written and realize that I've done all this, I'm in this position, but I'm just here in the journey with you. That's so inspiring to me.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Part of me, there's a voice going, it's lack of self-esteem. I don't know if that's true or not. But no, I think I do see myself still very much on a healing journey. And I think that, yes, I've got a good nearly 10-year recovery behind me, but I've still got a long way to go. And I think that I just don't feel that I'm an authority. I don't feel that I'm an expert. I want to do it as much as others do the work. In fact, I probably created it for me because I wanted to do something like this. And so I just thought, well, okay, I can create that. And so secretly, really, I wish that I was just a participant and didn't have to run it. But of course, I think in some respects, I do want to run it because I think it actually enables me a sense of control. That I think is still very important to me. So as much as I try and let that go, it still makes me feel safer when I'm kind of in charge.
Yeah. I feel like it also just, to me, or one thing that's come out for me is there is no broken and fixed. So there is no, we're all broken, I've got to fix myself. I think it's just, there's all of us, and there's just being better than there's being self-aware and being a little bit better at being us, being a little bit better at our emotions, being a little bit better at understanding what any conditioning, not just the sort that we're talking about, but what any conditioning in life, how that might be shaping who we are, and how can we understand that and be better at life despite of it.
Exactly. And that's what I really love. I spent a long time probably getting involved in new agey sort of stuff whereby like I've just got to think better and then I'll be better. And then I'll be this like perfect version of myself that can stand on a stage and just heal people or something. God knows what I was thinking. It was complete delusion and embarrassing in the stories that I have. But, I realized what I was doing is I was denying actually the pain. And I think for me, it's just like accepting that there's both sides of the coin. Yes. And that's just really important to, like, you don't want to sit in one space. So you want to have an awareness that there's something else that exists on the opposite side, but also not have an expectation that you have to get there or be there just yet. And I think that's been very hard for me to accept that where I am right now is where I'm meant to be. But that's, I think, something that I really believe in, and that I try not to move to the optimism straight away, or it's about empowerment, and it's about, getting over your abuse, and you're totally going to fix yourself and, be this fabulous person. And just saying it's, it's okay for you to feel shit
Mm.
because you were really, really hurt, and
Yeah.
that's okay. And also too, here's somebody though writing a piece of poetry about, strength and resilience, and just you get to hear that, but you
Mm.
also get to say that you're broken, and that's cool.
Yeah.
But actually all the women that are in the workshop are just so strong, and they're real fighters. They're fighters, and they get up every day, and they have to get in the ring, and they've got to kind of, they've got to box with themselves constantly to box out the voices that are in their head telling
Mm.
them, you're a piece of shit, you should die. And I know that, and I know how to speak to them and be with them because I was that, and
Mm.
still that can be that, for years. And through accepting that and just being able to kind of go, just through saying it, that's when I started to heal. And then I was able to create a space for just an alternative way of thinking. Didn't mean I had to always do that alternative way of thinking or, think new thoughts. It's like, but to know that that was there, and also that the process gets easier, that each day you can restart, all of those things.
Mm.
It's a bit of 12 step in there as well. It was good training. I don't go to the program anymore, but it was good training to kind of, have those mantras that you get in your head.
I love it. How can people listening, well, if people are listening and they're interested in connecting for any future workshops that you're doing, or they want to buy the book, or they want to keep their eye on that documentary when it's released, how do they contact you?
Okay, so look up Left Right Hook, so left and then WRITE hook.com, and you can also just look that up on Facebook. Join the Facebook page if you want to find out about the workshops. Things have obviously stalled with COVID, but I will run them. They won't be filmed or anything. They'll just be kind of normal workshops. And leftrightook.com is where the documentary trailer is, and where you can kind of just keep in the loop about the project and the book and all of those kind of things. And you can, of course, buy the book on Amazon or Booktopia and all those reputable online sites.
Very worth buying, might I add. Thank you so much, Donna. You are doing
Pleasure.
incredible things.
Thanks, Tiff. Huge amount of respect for the work that you're doing, and really pleased to be part of the program.
My friend Donna Lyon, welcome to Roll with the Punches.
Thank you.